Okay, it is recording. Great. So we left off talking about snakes. We were on the Colibridae family, which once again is half of your current living snakes. They have a couple unifying features in this group. Their skull bones are solidly united. So their skull bones do have, they have the same kinetic skull structure, which we'll see in a couple slides more what the kinetic skull deals with, but it deals with skull movement. But they have very remarkably similar skull features that help to define this group. Because there is a lot of diversity. Yes?
Wait, do you find kinetic skull?
No.
Okay.
We will get there in a couple slides. It deals with the movement in how the skull can move. So it's going to deal with swallowing. So we have a lovely picture of a snake swallowing a mouse. Not an actual snake swallowing an actual mouse. It's a textbook picture. But we will get there in a moment. Yes. High levels of diversity. They do also have the loss of the pelvic girdle. So nobody in this group has any remnants of a pelvic girdle. The ones that are venomous have hollow fangs. So the venom is going to come through the fang. For all of your snakes, chemiosensation is important for detecting prey. The forked tongue helps with chemiosensation.
This is a random question, but do all snakes have fangs?
No. They do not. And we will have later the different pictures of the different fang styles. There are multiple fang styles, some that fold, some are permanent, some have none. And how does their jaw structure then look is different depending upon the types of fangs they have. The forked tongue is better for chemiosensation than a rounded tongue like ours, because you have two different places where you can sense information from, distinctly different ends of the tongue for sensing information. And you can actually, well, we can't, the snakes with these can move the tips of the tongue independently, which allows them to sense here, pull back their tongue, get a better sense of what's going on, and then do I go this direction or this one? So they're able to narrow in on following a chemical trail by utilizing their forked tongue. They retract the tongue back into the mouth, and they touch those tips to that vomeronasal organ in the top of the mouth, which is going to then sense the taste of what they're following, and it will help them go in the next direction. Some of them you will see will taste their tongue to the ground. Others will taste the air with the tongue because they're able to pick up scent and taste information from air as well. And they then follow a trail of chemical stimuli to their prey item or to their potential mate. Constricting snakes move slowly. The muscles that make you a good constrictor may not make you a particularly fast snake. So they have specialized muscle tissues good for constricting, which means there's usually, when you have a specialized structure, there's usually a trade-off somewhere. So constriction, trade-off is speed. Your non-constricting snakes are faster. And because they move quickly, we also find that the way that they sense things are a little bit more visually oriented. You'll see these snakes move quickly, pause, put their head up, look around, move quickly again, pause, look around. So each of the lifestyles is going to be related to the anatomy and physiology differences, and all of this becomes well connected in their life history. Arboreal snakes tend to be long. That length allows them to well distribute their body weight so that they don't just topple out of the trees. It also allows them to have a longer body surface to wrap around to anchor themselves into the trees. So weight distribution and better anchoring are the byproduct of a longer snake. And your arboreal ones also have large eyes. Any idea why they might have big eyes?
I don't know, maybe if they're like looking for prey, like from up above, they have to use them to see.
So they're going to need to be able to find their prey. Do you think they're going to be exposed to a lot of sunlight? Perhaps some of them? Maybe. They may also, depending upon where they live, if they live in a rainforest, they may not have a lot of sunlight. So different ones are going to have slightly different specializations of eyes. But if you're spending all of your day in the tree, you need to be able to see around where your prey are. So having large eyes is going to be a good way in order to find prey. Burrowing. Why would they be short as snakes? Burrowing snakes. They dig tunnels. They tend to be short and stout, squat, whatever. Short snakes.
Helps them concentrate their body energy power.
Maybe part of it is power generation. Another part is your tunnels don't have, and burrows don't have to be as long. But one of the big ones is that there's less friction then between the body and the ground surface. There's also then less damage and other things because they have a condensed body structure. It's really easy to move in burrows when you don't have your body spread out over 3 feet of length. You're also not going to get part of your body stuck in the turn of a tunnel as much. They tend to have blunt heads to help with digging and small eyes because many of them tend to be nocturnal and not rely on eyesight or entirely blind. Your sea snakes came from terrestrial ancestors. Their tail is laterally flattened to an oar. Ventral scales are reduced or absent. Like alligators, they have nostrils on the dorsal surface that they can close with valves for when they're swimming. The lung extends the entire length of the body. This allows for a few things. It allows them to hold a lot of oxygen, to breathe a lot when they're at the surface, and have a lot of air held within their body. But you might be thinking this lung across the entire top surface of the body sounds surprisingly like a swim bladder in a fish, and they adjust the lung as a way of creating and changing buoyancy. Because they have lost the scales, they also have a strange adaptation. They can absorb oxygen through their skin. If they were fully scaled, they would not be able to absorb oxygen through the skin because the scales would impede the uptake of oxygen. So loss of scales is related to their lifestyle, but it also allows them to not surface for oxygen as quickly. With one exception, they are viviparous. So they give live birth, which means they never have to leave the water. The one exception species does have to leave the water in order to lay its eggs on land because it lays eggs. And if it lays the eggs in the water, the eggs are porous, the developing fetus will drown. That one exception is Latticota. They actually keep the ventral scales and they bask in the sun for temperature regulation. The others do not do this. And they lay eggs. They are a separate branch of sea snakes because they seem to be a second type of secondary aquatic lineage, but they're probably not part of this original one. Before we get to skulls, the last thing with snakes that we're looking at is locomotion specializations. Different snakes move differently. And the differences in movements are going to be related to the body structure, but also to the predatory mode and sometimes to the substrate they're moving in. Who here has ever walked in wet sand? Do you walk differently in wet sand than you do on dry sand? Do you walk differently in sand, for that matter, than you do on concrete or mud? So we know there's going to be a difference in locomotion. And we just have a small part of our body in contact with the ground surface, not the entire body in contact with it. So locomotion is going to relate sometimes to substrate differences. Your snakes, in general, are going to move by a lateral undulation of the body, which is going to create a series of curves as they move. What do I mean by series of curves? A series of curves. They're going to slither. Lateral undulations are slithering. And as they do, there's going to be compression and extension of muscles on different sides of the vertebral column. Each curve of the body is actually going to press backwards and a little bit down. So they're going to be pushing backwards so that they can move forwards. We do the same thing when we walk, right? As you take a step, you're going to be pushing your heel down and backwards as you step forward with the other foot. So that down and backwards is a pretty common type of thing with motion. The three primary types of specialization are the rectilinear, the concertina, and the sidewinding. You've likely heard of sidewinders or snakes called sidewinders. Has anyone heard that word before for a snake? Usually it's some type of Western or like a desert movie because that's common in desert sand. But our rectilinear ones are basically moving in a mostly straight line. These tend to be your heavy-bodied snakes, your large boas, things like that. They are stalking their prey. And when they move, they actually sometimes move more like a slug than a snake, more like a snail, because they'll pick up a section of their body and just kind of like heft it forward and drag themselves after it. I imagine you've all seen a snail or a slug move when they do this. They head pops forward and they kind of pull the body along with it. The snake is a little bit like that sometimes in rectilinear movement because they're alternating sections of the body that they lift off the ground as they pull forward. Because of this, they tend to be pretty slow. The picture up here, B, is showing us that idea of rectilinear movement. A is your normal lateral undulations. Normally we would have them just having those irregular curves moving forward. But as they pick up parts of the body and move forward, there's going to be differences in stretching and contracting of muscles. The concertina passage or motion is done in narrow passages, burrows. A lot of your burrowing snakes will do this. And they will push their body in its looped position against the burrow wall and use that as a way of pushing forward. Any of you ever watched swimming events in the Olympics?
Oh, yeah.
When they're getting ready to do backstroke, they're up against the wall and they use that push off as a way of getting extra propulsion, extra movement, don't they? So these snakes are doing the same thing. I'm going to line myself up against here and I'm going to push off. When they fully extend, the loop structure is going to look different than when they're compressed. What's going on there? Oh, they're replacing the light bulbs in there. Sorry. All of the lights burned out the other day in the prep room while Dr. Loxo and Dr. Dubé were looking for supplies for the 151 labs in the cabinets in the corner. It was fun. So this is the concertina one. So I'm going to bunch my body up. I'm going to push. Then I'm going to bunch up in another location and push forward. And then at the bottom, we have the sidewinding. In sidewinding, it's primarily seen in the desert. And they raise their body in loops as they move. 2/3 of the body is generally in contact with the ground surface at any point in time. They swing the loops forward and the points of contact they have with the ground surface change every time they push themselves a little bit forward. Their force, unlike everybody else, is not really a downward force as they're moving. It is a sideways force against the sand. Because what happens when you press down in sand? You sink. So they're going to be lightly touching the sand and pushing sideways. So their movement is a sideways direction on an angle to move forward as opposed to a straight forward line. Mary.
The slide report says that the force is 16 down.
Whoops. Yeah. It's both. The force is extended downward, but the resulting motion is sideways. That is where I was going. The force is not in, it's multidimensional. Let's see. So it's like this and this. So it's mostly down. There is, but the resulting motion is sideways. You are correct. But it's not down in the same way ours is. When 2/3 of the body is in contact, there's no, with the ground surface, there's no small area of sinkage with the downward force. If you or I take a step in the sand with our foot very strongly, what happens? The foot starts to sink. They have their body lightly laying across it. When they move this way, the other thing that happens is they may take the sand with them. You can track sidewinding snakes by the path they leave, because as they move, the sand can move too. So you get these kind of sliding marks in the sand. Force is downward, movement is sideways.
So just the difference is the other one's going to look like it's going forward, but the other
These are always going to look like they're going on an angle.
Okay.
We looked at snake skeleton, what, second week of the semester? Like the fish skeleton, did it look delicate? Which is strange given how snake bodies look nothing delicate at all. But the skeleton is delicate. Why does this matter? Well, how many of you would like to know a lot about snake evolution? Delicate skeletons don't fossilize well, if at all. So we don't have a complete fossil record at all of snake evolution. There's very little in the fossil record that's useful for snakes because their skeletons just don't fossilize well. But we do know when we look at the skeleton, what makes for a good snake lifestyle is very different than what makes for a normal good vertebrate lifestyle. They've rearranged their body. They've specialized for locomotion and predation, and in doing so, they've rearranged the entire internal anatomy. The left lung is reduced or absent. The gallbladder is further down the body than the liver, which is kind of strange when you think about the role of the gallbladder in digestion. The right kidney is in front of the liver in the body. The gonads may be displaced on one side of the body or in different locations throughout the body, more spread out, as opposed to in a single, easy to find location. They've also reduced the body diameter dramatically because of that body structure that they have. And that is why the internal anatomy is so strange. Instead of having a body that might be this big around, they have one that's this big around. And as you do that, there's very small areas for your internal features. And here we're getting to that idea of the kinetic skull. Who's ever tried a pie eating contest? Anybody ever want to try like a pie eating contest or something like that? Pie eating? Yes? What if you have your hands tied behind your back the whole time? How about then? And if you try to eat your meals without using your hands? Just, Mary V, what's it like to eat a meal without your hands?
Tastes better for some reason.
Is it messy?
Yeah.
Now imagine you're a snake. How do you get that prey to stay still so you can hold on to it while you attempt to swallow it? And all you have is your mouth. Unlike the birds, who at least have feet to kind of help them some, or can maybe use their wings to beat something down, the snakes literally have their mouths. So when you swallow your prey, you can't rearrange it the way when you, for lack of a better phrase, swallow your prey, you cut it up with a fork and knife, or you pick it up with a spoon, and your tongue moves it around and everything's fine, right? Because the pieces are smaller than your mouth. This mouse is larger than the mouth of the snake. So the snake is going to have to extend its mouth in order to swallow it. They actually swallow prey and get it into their mouth in the first place by rotating their jaw and their teeth and by rotating the head. So they're kind of going to have this side of the jaw pull out so they can get it partway in, and then they're going to turn the head and get this one to come partway out so they can continue getting it into their mouth until eventually the entire head of the mouse fits into their jaw opening, constantly turning the head from side to side, hyperextending the jaw. They have eight joints in the skull for movement of the mouth and jaw and the skull. This is the idea of that kinetic skull. That promotes rotation, including sideways rotation of the mouth. So our jaws move up and down. If you slightly pop it out of joint, you can move it a little bit sideways, but they can move theirs entirely to the side. It allows them to maneuver the jaw in a way that they can swallow the food easily. The joints move independently on either side of the head so that one side of the jaw can move in one direction while the other side is moving differently. The mandibles are attached to the skull by muscles and skin. These mandibles are your jaws. They can move sideways, forwards, backwards, and entirely independently. They use the teeth on one side of the jaw to grip the prey, while generally hyperextending the other side of the jaw to swallow it. And then they continue moving it further down their mouth into their gullet, lack of a better term. A flexible jaw means you can eat things larger than your head. Did any of your parents or grandparents ever say that to you when you're like filling up your plate with food? You shouldn't try to eat things that are larger than your head. We really can't we? But snakes can. Blunt-headed snakes can use their head shape to pry snails out of their shells. And some of your snakes will appear almost toothless. What they have are teeth further back. And if they, depending upon their lifestyle, some of them eat bird eggs as their food. What they will do is they will swallow the bird egg, and the teeth that are further back will slice into it as they're swallowing it. But they don't have the teeth in the front because then the egg would crack as they're biting into it. So the teeth are slightly further back in the jaw that will crack into the egg. And then they're swallowing the raw egg. But taking a live prey item is really dangerous, particularly when you have no hands to protect you and you're trying to swallow it and your eyes are right there and your nostrils are right there and your teeth are right there and a prey item could attack you. So the risks for the snake of taking a live prey are pretty solid. That's where their skull is slightly different from ours. Their skull bones entirely enclose and cover the brain. Is our brain protected well, like down here? No, because if you get in here, you can get straight up into the brain. And then we have constriction and venom, two of the best things a snake predator, right, can have. as it's going after its prey. As we learned at the zoo, constriction is not about pressure, is it? What did she say it was about? How do constrictors really kill their prey? It's not that they squeeze them to death. They suffocate them. How do they do it?
Every time they take a breath in, they squeeze tighter, so their lungs can expand and they can air.
Eventually, they'll suffocate. Because when you inhale, which direction does your body, do your lungs move when you inhale? And when you exhale, unless you're hyperventilating, then they move opposite. And if someone hugs you tighter every time you inhale, are you going to be able to, every time you exhale, are you going to be able to inhale well? So this constrictor is looping its body around, going tighter with every exhale. Constrictors have very short vertebrae, and their trunk muscles are very different from other snakes in order to allow them to do this. That way they can have lots of ability to tighten the loops of their bodies. And the body loops also create friction against the body that they are trying to constrict, allowing them to have a better grip. Most of the prey items, they make sure they have around the rib cage, but also at the throat, so that they're constricting the throat and the thorax regions of the body. And eventually a large amount of pressure, even if they're still able to breathe, can stop the heart from beating. Your prey can't escape, you have them in place. They can't bite you well if they're not up near your mouth, or if you're not wrapped around near their mouth. And we believe this lifestyle is a result that it developed, that it evolved, because in the Miocene, there was like an explosion of rodent life. So that this was a development because of how many rodents were available. But our earliest colubrids used venom to immobilize their prey. Duvernoy's gland is in the upper jaw. It's found in your colubrids. In the vipers and the elapsids, it's a venom gland, so they're not quite identical. Toxic secretion is an ancestral trait for these groups. We believe that your non-venomous snakes lost it, and your constrictors are probably a side branch of snakes that were at one point in time venomous. If you have a toxin that you can inject in your prey items, you can be more mobile. Constrictors are less mobile, but the ones that have toxins don't have to have the constrictor lifestyle to hold on to their prey, so they can be more mobile. Front fanged venomous snakes are different from some of the other venomous snakes, but they are not necessarily the newest version of the snakes. At one point in time, we thought they were. The front fanged venomous snakes use a very different method of injecting venom than most snakes. Are the fangs that inject the venom up here, or are they back further? Is kind of the question we're dealing with. Because there are different fangs, which gets us to Gabby's question. The Aglastis do not have fangs. They don't. This is a picture of fangs right here. They wouldn't have those. The Aptisioglyphus have one or more fangs near the maxilla. Oh, what's that word? What is maxilla dealing with? The maxillary teeth. So in the first picture, we have someone with no fangs, just teeth. In the second one, we have fangs in the rear of the maxilla. That F letter is referring to fangs here. MAX is referring to the maxilla structure. So here, your fangs are near the maxilla, In C, the fangs are behind it. In D, the fangs are on the maxilla and they will rotate out when they're ready to bite them. And in this one, your fangs are permanently in front of the maxilla structures of your teeth. So some of them will have one or more fangs near the maxilla. B, C, they're near the maxilla. Some will have hollow fangs at the front of the maxilla. These are your protoglossus, these are your cobras, your mambas, coral snakes, and sea snakes. Their fangs are going to be short, but permanently there. They do not rotate. They're here. And then our last group are the Solanoglossus. They have hollow fangs on the maxilla. These are your pit vipers and your true vipers. Their fangs fold up and flat against the roof of the mouth as the jaw closes. It allows them to have very long fangs. That way they can take down larger prey items so they can inject the venom much deeper. And venom will kill your prey, but it also may have enzymes or other things that help speed up the digestion of the prey for the snake that will then be injected into the body of the prey item. Venom is a great way to catch prey. You bite it, you inject the venom, you let it run around, get all crazy, you follow its scent trail, and then you find it and you eat it. It's a really safe way to catch prey. It may be a kind of tragic way, but it's safe. Lizards are going to have different foraging strategies. Some are going to be sedentary, and others are constantly moving. So we have two main groups. We're going to call them the sit and wait, sedentary, or widely foraging, constantly moving. How many of you were like, I have friends that these are described by these two groups? Yes. The sit and wait ones. They're going to hang around. They're going to find a nice perch. They're not going to leave the perch. If they have a perch they like, they're going to keep coming back to it. They're going to wait until they see something, then they're going to run out, they're going to grab it, and they're going to come right back. Their activity is not going to last long. And often they aren't active. This is also a really good lifestyle to have if you're an ectotherm, where you don't need much energy to begin with. The widely foraging, these guys are always moving around. I'm looking for my prey, I'm looking for prey, I'm looking for prey. Means they're going to need to eat a lot more. They're constantly active. They're rarely going to stay in one location at a time. It would be lovely if we only had these two. But what we find is that there are also cruising foragers. These are your in-between. They are sometimes really active, and sometimes they're hanging out and waiting. Or maybe they're equally hanging out and waiting, and then moving around. We're going to look at each type of foraging style because it's going to be related to the prey that they eat. It's going to be related to the predators that eat them. It's going to be related to their habitat and their social systems, what sensory systems they rely on, their reproduction strategies, and their life history are all related to how they eat. I remember one of my professors in undergrad saying that animals are really, really worried about three things: finding food, not being food, finding a mate. That's it. Everything relates to those three things. And you'll see that in them, their entire life history portion is going to be wrapped in that. Because of this, we see that different families have different foraging styles, which should not surprise you. But it appears that there is a phylogenetic split, so different evolutionary patterns from different evolutionary lineages. Is it a consequence? So this went this way, this went this way, or was there one ancestral one? How many of you think that the sit and wait and the actively foraging represent two very different patterns and that they diverged really quickly into those two lineages? Or do you think that probably our ancient ones were really the cruising foragers and that from there they developed separate lineages? We believe it's the second one. We believe that the cruising forager, which looks to us now as an in-between, is actually the ancestor, and the more specialized are the more derived, and they are evolutionarily newer, which makes sense when you think about things about derived versus ancestral, that derived is your more specialized ideas. Is it strange to you that we keep coming back to these concepts throughout this course? We're going to keep repeating words we learned in chapter 1. Your sit and wait foragers. Your iguana is the perfect example. Larger bodied. Generally a shorter tail. Because they're moving less, so balance is less of an issue. They tend to be cryptically colored. Because when you're sitting around waiting all day, there's a decent chance your predator's out there looking for you. If you're not cryptically colored, they're going to eat you. They may have dorsal blotches and patterns on them, so they may not be a singular color. They may be cryptically spotted. When they're sitting around, they're looking over a large area. So they probably have larger territories. They may, in fact, be very territorial with each other. They usually detect and capture large insects as their food prey items. So they're waiting for a large insect to move by. They see it, they run out really fast, grab it, eat it, return to their area. They're more likely to have predators that are actively searching. Hawks, foxes. Your widely foraging, or your active foragers, are a lot of your lizard type groups, your small lizards. These groups tend to be slim bodied with a very long tail, and they tend to be striped. The stripes, we believe, help them to blend in, because when you see something striped that is moving, you can't focus on it as well, so you can't actually see this fast moving striped item. Also, it may just look like the passage of sunlight on something or a shadow. They're constantly moving, poking their snouts under leaves, in crevices, maybe even digging a little bit, because they're trying to find a scent trail of something to follow. They rely on chemical cues. The other group is eyesight. These guys are chemical cues to find their food. They will eat usually smaller insects than the other group does, and they find your more sedentary insects as well. Their prey tends to be patchy in distribution, so they may have a larger territory or perhaps no territory at all. Because one thing you may learn in ecology is when a resource is patchy, there's no reason to defend a territory because there's no guarantee it's always going to be there. They're more likely to be eaten by a sit and wait predator. Something like perhaps a blue heron, which if you've seen them, they sit and wait and stalk their prey. And these guys use a really amazing predator avoidance mechanism. Common. Self-amputation of tail as far anterior as possible. And then we regenerate a new tail. So his tail is off there. That tail, usually fracture occurs between 4 and 9 on the fracture plates in the vertebrae, between vertebrae 4 and 9. We find that the tails continue to twitch and pump out blood for several minutes after this, which makes the predator think, now I've got 2 pieces of prey, and this one is running away and this one is not. I'm going to eat this one. The predator doesn't get as much of a payoff from it because all they have is a tail, but your prey item has gotten away. They're still alive. It's still expensive though, because you have to regenerate your new trail. You're going to have to generate it with cartilage if you've lost those bone structures. What we've discovered is when you look at their tails and the tail stump that's left afterwards, is that tail stump that's still part of their body, the arteries have sphincter muscles and valves in them that will close shut so that there's not a lot of blood loss. Because at first you're probably thinking, ripping your tail off, you're just going to bleed to death. But they have special structures there that keep that from happening. So it will cut off blood flow just above where the tail is broken off. One of the other reasons that what is regrown is cartilage is they don't necessarily regrow all of these structures too. So that's going to be what's closer to the body. And that lost tail has diverted your predator. But every time you lose your tail after that, you're losing it closer and closer to the body. At some point in time, you cannot lose your tail again. We have discovered when we studied their behavior that those that have a shorter tail have a very low role in species with social hierarchies. That regenerated tail will demote them in the social hierarchy. Also, it affects their energy balance. Your lizards store fat in their tails. Females that have lost their tail cannot produce as many eggs as females that still have one. And for geckos, their ability to deal with temperature is in effect with this too, because when the body is cold, they want to retain that fat store, so they will kind of lose less of the tail, if at all possible. Because if they lose that fat store and it's very cold, they could have some problems. So losing this tail, though, works. So here we have a skink that is being attacked by a snake. And the skink, as you can see, leaves his tail, which the snake has in the bottom picture, but our skink is running away. So the snake has attacked it by its tail. It allows its tail to fracture and break off while it runs away and the snake eats his tail.
I'm just like confused with how it lets it fracture. Like,
So the pulling on the tail by the predator is going to start kind of the process. And these, you know how our bones are not meant to break? These are actually, this is not the right analogy, but it's the one I'm going to use. Think of it as a perforated sheet of paper, pulling one of those from a notebook as opposed to one that's not. So these are places where they're not perforated. They are areas where it is meant to break off. And you will lose the first one, then you will lose the next one, and so forth. So as the process starts and they're pulling away, as the predator is pulling on them, it snaps. And then the tail is left and immediately everything closes down. Does that help? So there are these predetermined fracture plates where when there's enough pressure in both directions, they could also potentially, let's say their tail gets stepped on by us or a horse or something, that pressure as they try to pull away could also break off the tail. So it's dealing with a pressure differential and a movement differential. I can't move, I need to move, break off my tail, leave it, because the loss of my social structure, the loss of my fat stores is less important than the loss of my life. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Brings us to our last topic for this, social behavior. We'll finish most of this today. For these guys, it's visual, auditory, chemical, tactile. For some, all. For some, just one. For some, there's going to be a series of this, then this, then this, then this. We can't talk about everybody, so we're going to use a few examples. For your iguanas, visual is what they rely on for social interactions. For the Sclergossans, it's pheromones that they rely on. So a lot of your lizards are going to use pheromones, iguanas, visual. And we've discovered that signals for courtship are remarkably similar to signals for hierarchy, dominance, and aggression. What may vary is how exaggerated your signal is or how often they do it. It seems that a lot of social interactions are a development out of courtship behaviors. This is true throughout this group. We see it in the lizards. We also see it in the birds, that there's a strong relationship between signals used for dominance and hierarchy and signals used for courtship. For our male Anolis, their Guller fan is their main visual display. We've studied this extensively because these are easy to study in nature and in the lab. It can be brightly colored. They use it in conjunction with the head and body movements to determine special signals. No two species have the same colors. So different colors help them when you have multiple species living in the same area to figure out who is who. Orange, yellow, pink, white, white with yellow spot, red with blue spots, orange, yellow with a blue center spot, red checkered spots. Different types of colors are different organisms. And they raise their body and display this fan when this chin fan, like a beard for lizards perhaps, when they want to give information. Some of them will straighten their body and do push-ups. That way they look, and they're bobbing their whole body up and down, and this Guller fan is moving up and down. Some of them just bob their head up and down. Some of them will extend and contract this skin, this fan of skin. Some of them will do more things. These lines down here, your blue lines are showing head bobbing movement, and that dotted line is showing Guller fan extension. So you've got colors, body movements, head movements, and rotation of this fan all happening at the same time. It's going to be able to convey lots of messages. And the response to the display frequently helps us figure out what display it is. Is it aggressive or is it mating? If it's aggressive, it'll be done towards another male, done for territory dispute or defense. Both of them will do it angrily and it will increase in speed. Passive. They're trying to get a female to court her. There will be different things. They will not appear as angry, usually, as they're doing this. And you will notice that she may respond with the same gestures or with different ones, depending upon the species. It's important that they're able to notice the color and body pattern differences for different species, because why waste your energy fighting someone of another species for your territory or trying to court a female who is not of your species? We will finish with these examples next time. So we'll do finishing this, and I think it's ectothermy on Monday. I do have your exams. I did post all of the grades. I appreciate all of the answers to the take home.
For this PowerPoint,
Yeah, for our paper, I mean, we're like, yeah, so like that, and like all the characters, the other one.
Yes.
Like, I watched, it's already on.